I remember the exact sound of her voice when she made the promise. It was soft and warm, like a blanket fresh from the dryer. My daughter Sarah said, "Mum, you will never go to a home. I will take care of you." She said this while sitting on my sofa in Leeds, drinking my tea and eating my biscuits. I believed her because that is what mothers do. We believe the lies that keep us warm. 3 years later, I sat in an empty flat with an unpaid heating bill and a letter from a solicitor. Sarah had taken everything except my regret. And I learned that a daughter's promise is only as strong as the money that backs it up. My name is Patricia. I am 73 years old. I live in a small market town called Otley, just north of Leeds. The air here smells like wool and rain. I worked as a seamstress for 32 years. I made curtains for people who had bigger houses than me. I fixed hems for brides who had younger knees. I was never rich, but I was never hungry. My husband, Alan, died 14 years ago from a lung infection that came out of nowhere. 1 week he was fixing the shed door. The next week he was gone. That is how life works. Fast and unfair. After Alan died, I sold our family home. It was a 3-bedroom terrace with a garden that Alan loved. Too big for one person. Too full of ghosts. I bought a smaller flat near the high street. 2 bedrooms. A tiny kitchen. A window that faces the churchyard. I can see the graves from my chair. That sounds sad, but it is not. The graves remind me that time is short. I wanted to use my remaining time well. I have 2 daughters. Sarah is the oldest. She is 45. She lives in Manchester with her husband Paul and their 3 children. Helen is the youngest. She is 39. She lives in Scotland. Helen calls every week. She sends me scarves she knits herself. Sarah calls when she needs something. That has been the pattern since they were children. Helen gave. Sarah took. I loved them both the same, but I trusted them differently. When I sold the house, I had about £180,000 after all the fees. Not a fortune, but enough to keep me comfortable for 20 years if I was careful. I put most of it in a savings account. I kept some in cash for emergencies. I told both daughters about the money. That was my first mistake. Helen said, "Mum, spend it on yourself." Sarah said nothing. She just nodded. But her eyes did a small calculation. I saw it. I chose to ignore it. Sarah started visiting more often after that. Every other weekend, instead of every other month. She brought the grandchildren. She helped me clean the windows. She stayed for dinner. It felt good to have her around. I was lonely after Alan. The flat was quiet. Too quiet. Sarah filled the quiet with noise and chaos and dirty dishes. I did not mind the dishes. I minded the motive. But I did not want to see it. She said, "Mum, why are you living in this small flat when you have all that money?" I said, "Because I like this flat." She said, "You could buy a bungalow with a garden." I said, "I do not want a garden." Alan had a garden. Alan is dead. She laughed. I laughed. But her laugh was sharper than mine. She was already spending my money in her head. The trigger came one cold November evening. Sarah sat me down in her kitchen after a Sunday roast. She poured me a glass of wine. She never poured me wine. She said, "Mum, Paul lost his job." My heart sank. I said, "I am sorry, sweetheart." She said, "We cannot afford the mortgage. We might lose the house. The children will have to change schools." She started crying. Real tears or good acting, I still do not know. She said, "Mum, can you help us? Just a loan. Just until Paul finds something new." I asked how much she needed. She said £50,000. That was nearly a third of my savings. I said, "That is a lot of money, Sarah." She said, "I know, but you do not need it right now. You are healthy. You have your pension. You can live on that for a while. I will pay you back. I promise." I believed her. Because she was my daughter. Because the grandchildren were involved. Because I am a fool who confuses love with guilt. I transferred the money the next week. £50,000. No paperwork. No contract. Just a mother's trust and a daughter's tearful hug. Sarah said, "You saved us, Mom." I will never forget this. I said, "Just take care of me when I am old." That was my condition. Not interest. Not repayment dates. Just care. She agreed. She said, "Of course, Mom. You will always have a home with us." That was the promise. When she broke before the tea went cold. The turning point was not the money. The turning point was my condition. Because once I asked for care in return, the money stopped being a gift and started being a transaction. And Sarah was never good with transactions unless she came out ahead. The first sign of trouble came 6 months later. Paul found a new job, but it paid less than the old one. Sarah stopped bringing the children to visit. She said they were busy with school activities. I understood. Children are busy. But then my calls started going unanswered. I would ring on Sunday afternoon. She would text back hours later. "Sorry, Mom, busy. We'll call tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. I started feeling like a creditor, not a mother. The second sign was the money requests. They started small. "Can you send $50 for a school trip, Mom? Can you cover the gas bill this month, Mom?" I said yes to everything. I did not want to seem difficult. I did not want to lose what little contact I had left. Each request came with a reminder of her promise. "You are so good to us, Mom. We will take care of you." I held onto those words like a life raft. But the raft had a leak. Then came the conversation about the flat. Sarah called me one evening. Her voice was sweet like honey on a sore throat. She said, "Mom, have you thought about selling your flat?" I said no. "I like my flat." She said, "But it is too big for you. And the stairs are hard on your knees." "You said your knees hurt." I said my knees are fine. She said I found a lovely retirement community near us. Very safe. Very social. You would have your own room and 3 meals a day. I said I do not want a retirement community. She said, "But Mom, you would be closer to the children." I said I am fine where I am. She did not push. But she did not stop either. Every week, she brought up the retirement community. Every week she mentioned how much my flat was worth. How the money could help the family. How I could see the grandchildren every day. She made it sound like a gift. But the gift was for her, not for me. The third sign was the coldest. I visited Sarah for a weekend. I brought gifts for the children. I helped with laundry. I cooked dinner 2 nights in a row. On the third night, I overheard a conversation. Sarah and Paul were in the kitchen. They thought I was asleep on the sofa. Sarah said, "We cannot wait much longer. We need that flat money." Paul said, "Your mother is stubborn." Sarah said, "Then we make her uncomfortable. We stop visiting. We stop calling. She will come around. She has no one else. Helen is in Scotland. Her friends are dying. She will break. They always break." I did not confront them. I stayed on the sofa with my eyes closed. My heart was pounding so loud, I was sure they could hear it. I left the next morning. I said I had a headache. Sarah did not hug me goodbye. She was already practicing distance. That was the moment I understood. The promise was never about care. It was about control. She would take care of me only after I gave her everything. My flat. My savings. My dignity. And then she would put me in a room with 3 meals a day and forget my name. The discovery came through a piece of junk mail. I was sorting my post one Tuesday morning. A brochure fell out of a magazine. It was for the retirement community Sarah had mentioned. The one near her house. I almost threw it away. But something made me look closer. The brochure had a handwritten note on it. Not my handwriting, Sarah's. She had written, "Call Mrs. Evans for pricing." Then she had written something else, a date. 2 weeks from that Tuesday. She had scheduled a viewing, for me. Without asking me. I called the retirement community. I pretended to be Sarah. I asked about the pricing. The woman on the phone said the entry fee is £120,000. That includes lifetime care. I said thank you and hung up. 120,000. The exact value of my flat. Sarah had done the math. She knew exactly how much she would get. She had planned it all, my flat. Her profit. My loneliness. Her freedom. I sat in my chair by the window. I looked at the churchyard. The graves looked peaceful. Not scary. Just honest. I thought about Alan. He always said trust people's actions, not their words. Sarah's words said I love you, Mom. Sarah's actions said I want your house. I finally listened to Alan. It only took 14 years. I did not cry. I did not call Sarah to scream at her. I just sat. Then I made tea. Then I called my solicitor. A quiet man named Mr. Chambers who smells like pipe tobacco. I told him everything. He said, Mrs. Clark, you need to protect your assets. I said, I know. He said, your daughter cannot force you to sell your flat. I said, I know that too. He said, but she can make your life miserable until you agree. I said then, I need a plan that does not depend on her kindness. Because her kindness ran out the day I said no. I started with the will. Mr. Chambers helped me draft a new one. My flat would go to Helen. My remaining savings would be split between Helen and a local charity that delivers meals to elderly people. Sarah would receive a small amount, £1,000. Enough to show I did not forget her. Not enough to ruin anyone. I signed the will in Mr. Chambers' office. He witnessed it. His secretary witnessed it. 3 copies. 1 for him. 1 for Helen. 1 for my safety deposit box. I did not tell Sarah about the will. That was not revenge. That was privacy. She had invaded my privacy enough. Next, I changed my bank. I moved my savings to a different building society. One Sarah did not know about. I set up a new account with a new card and a new PIN. I closed the old account. I took out a small amount of cash for emergencies and hid it in a tin under my bed. The tin used to hold biscuits. Now it holds my freedom. I also changed my locks. Sarah had a key. She said it was for emergencies. I realized her emergencies and my emergencies were different things. I called a locksmith, a young man with kind eyes. He changed all the locks in one afternoon. Cost me £200. Worth every penny. I put the old keys in a drawer. They look harmless now, but I know what they opened. My life, my home, my vulnerability. Then I called Helen. I told her everything. The 50,000. The retirement community. The conversation I overheard. The brochure. A scheduled viewing. Helen was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Mum, do you want me to talk to her? I said no. This is my conversation. But I want you to know the truth. Helen said I have always known the truth, Mum. I just waited for you to see it. That broke my heart a little. But it also healed something. I was not alone. I had Helen. Quiet, reliable Helen, who knits scarves and never asks for money. The final step was the hardest. I stopped answering Sarah's calls. Not forever. Just for a while. I needed space to think. She left messages. Are you okay, Mum? Why are you ignoring me? I am worried about you. I did not reply. The silence was loud. But it was my silence, not hers. The confrontation happened on a Saturday afternoon. Sarah showed up at my flat unannounced. She used her old key. She forgot I changed the locks. She stood outside my door for 10 minutes, ringing the bell and knocking. I watched her through the peephole. She looked angry. Not worried, angry. I opened the door. She pushed past me into the hallway. She said, Why did you change the locks? I said, Because I do not want uninvited guests. She said, I am not a guest. I am your daughter. I said, Daughters ask before they visit. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She was not used to me pushing back. She sat down on my sofa without being invited. She crossed her arms. She said, Mum, we need to talk about your future. I said, We have talked about it. You want me to sell my flat and move into a retirement community near you. She said, Yes. Because I want to take care of you. I said, No, Sarah. You want to take care of my money. She stood up. Her face went red. She said, That is not fair. I said, Fairness has nothing to do with it. I heard you and Paul in the kitchen. I heard you say I will break. She went pale. She said, You were supposed to be asleep. I said I was. But I woke up. And I heard everything. I walked to my kitchen drawer. I pulled out the new will. I handed it to her. She read it. Her hands were shaking. She said Helen gets the flat. I said yes. She said I get £1,000. I said yes. She said you cannot do this. I said I already did. It is legal. It is signed. It is done. She threw the will on the floor. She said you are punishing me for caring about you. I said no. I am protecting myself from someone who sees me as a transaction. She started crying. Loud crying. The kind that is meant to make you feel guilty. I did not feel guilty. I felt tired. I said, Sarah, I love you. But I do not trust you. And love without trust is just habit. I am breaking the habit. She left without saying goodbye. She slammed the door. The windows rattled. I picked up the will from the floor. I smoothed out the creases. I put it back in the drawer. Then I made tea. The tea was hot and bitter. Just like the truth. That was 2 years ago. Sarah and I still speak. Once a month. A short call. She asks about the weather. I ask about the children. We do not mention the money. We do not mention the flat. The words sit between us like a wall we both pretend is not there. Helen visits twice a year. She brings her family. We eat fish and chips. We watch old movies. We do not talk about Sarah. Some silences are peaceful. Some are not. I have learned to tell the difference. I still live in my flat. The stairs are harder on my knees now. That is true. But I manage. I have a lady who comes twice a week to help with cleaning. Her name is Mrs. O'Brien. She is 71. We drink tea together. She does not want my flat. She just wants the company. That is the difference between care and exploitation. Care asks for nothing but time. Exploitation asks for everything. The £50,000 I gave Sarah. I never saw it again. I stopped asking. That money is gone. But I learned something valuable. Money reveals people. It strips away the politeness and shows you what is underneath. Underneath Sarah was a woman who loved me, but loved my assets more. That is not evil. That is just human. But knowing it does not make it hurt less. The moral of this emotional story is simple. Keep your keys. Keep your locks. Keep your documents. And never confuse a promise with a contract. A promise breaks. A contract holds. My daughter promised to care for me. She broke that promise the moment I had something she wanted. I did not scream. I did not seek revenge. I just changed the locks and changed my will. That is not cruelty. That is dignity. And at 73, dignity is the only currency that matters. The closing line I hold close is this. You can love someone with your whole heart and still lock your front door. Love does not mean open season on your peace. If this real-life story hit close to home, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more calm, honest family drama, subscribe to this channel. We do not shout. We just tell the truth.